Paul Miki was born in 1564 in Japan, likely in the village of Tunu-Kumada, near present-day Nara Prefecture. He belonged to a prominent Japanese family, which allowed him access to an excellent education. His father was a samurai, a class that held high status in feudal Japan. Raised in a privileged environment, Miki received both traditional Japanese education and exposure to the cultural and philosophical ideas of the time. Paul Miki was introduced to Christianity through Jesuit missionaries who had been actively spreading the Christian faith in Japan since the arrival of St. Francis Xavier in 1549. Inspired by their teachings, Miki was baptized and entered Society of Jesus as a young man, undergoing a rigorous training in theology, philosophy, and pastoral care. As a Jesuit, Miki traveled extensively across Japan, preaching and converting many people to Christianity. He was known for his eloquence, deep knowledge of both Christian and Japanese traditions, and his ability to explain theological concepts in a way that resonated with his audience. His influence in Japanese and his understanding of native customs made him particularly effective in his mission. His sermons often addressed the compatibility of Christian beliefs with Japanese values, seeking to bridge the cultural gap that made Christianity a foreign concept to many. The political climate in Japan changed dramatically in the late 16th century. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the de facto ruler of Japan, initially tolerated Christianity, but later saw it as a potential threat to national unity and the stability of his rule. Growing concerns that European colonial influence, particularly from Spain and Portugal, led him to issue an edict banning Christianity in 1587. However, enforcement remained inconsistent until 1596, when tensions between Japan and Spain escalated. A Spanish galleon, the San Felipe, was shipwrecked off the coast of Japan, and its captain's statements about Spanish territorial ambitions fueled Hideyoshi's fears that Christian missionaries were part of a broader imperial strategy. This led to an aggressive crackdown on Christianity, resulting in the arrest of numerous missionaries and converts. Paul Miki, along with 25 others, were captured in Kyoto in December 1596 and imprisoned. After his arrest, Miki was subjected to harsh treatments. He and his fellow captives were publicly humiliated, paraded through the streets, and physically abused. In January 1597, they were sentenced to execution by crucifixion in Nagasaki, a city with a significant Christian population at the time. The condemned prisoners were forced to march approximately 800 kilometers or about 500 miles from Kyoto to Nagasaki in the dead of winter. Along the way, they were further mistreated but remained steadfast in their faith. Despite their suffering, Miki and his companions continued to pray, even preach to those they encountered, using their suffering as a testament to their faith. On February 5th, 1597, Paul, Miki, and his fellow prisoners were led to Nishizaka Hill in Nagasaki, where their execution was to take place. Tied to a wooden cross, they were subjected to further public mockery. Despite this, Miki used his final moments to deliver a sermon from the cross, reaffirming his commitment to Christianity and urging onlookers to embrace the faith. He particularly emphasized his loyalty to Japan, countering accusations that Christians were foreign agents. Paul Miki and the other martyrs were then executed through by being pierced through with spears, a method chosen to prolong their suffering. They died while singing hymns and prayers, refusing to renounce their beliefs even during their final moments. Saint Paul Miki is commonly depicted as a Japanese man wearing traditional religious or simple robes, often reflecting Jesuit attire. His garments may include a black cassock with a white collar, symbolizing his role as a Jesuit Sumerian. Unlike European saints, however, his depiction incorporates Japanese cultural elements, reflecting his heritage. One of the most defining aspects of his iconography is his crucifixion. He's frequently shown bound to a large wooden cross representing his martyrdom. The cross is often T-shaped or simple in structure, devoid of elaborate decorations to emphasize the starkness of his suffering. Sometimes the cross is elevated, positioned alongside those of his fellow martyrs, illustrating the collective nature of their sacrifice. In addition to the cross, St. Paul Miki is often shown with spears piercing his side, as this was the method of his crucifixion. The spears are typically depicted long and slender, with pointed blades penetrated his torso at an angle. This visual detail serves to highlight both his physical suffering and his spiritual triumph. Artists commonly portray St. Mickey as serene and with a peaceful expression, reflecting his steadfast faith and his inner strength in the face of death. His posture is upright even in crucifixion scenes, suggesting dignity and resilience. Sometimes his head is tilted slightly upward or to the side, indicating prayer or a connection to the divine. In some depictions, although his hands are bound or nailed, his fingers might be subtly positioned in gestures of blessing or prayer. This symbolizes his role as a preacher who continued to evangelize even during his final moments. St. Paul Miki is often depicted alongside with the other 25 martyrs of Nagasaki. In group composition, he is usually placed centrally or slightly elevated to indicate his prominence as a Jesuit leader among them. The martyrs are arranged in a line or semicircle, their crosses forming a solemn procession against a backdrop of hills or the sea, referencing Nishizaki Hill in Nagasaki. The background of his iconography frequently includes elements of Japanese scenery, such as Mount Fuji, traditional architecture, or coastal landscapes. These details root the narrative in Japan's culture and geographical context. Sometimes Japanese soldiers or samurai figures appear symbolizing the authorities responsible for the persecution. Other religious symbols may be present, such as rosaries hanging from his neck or attached to his belt, emphasizing his Jesuit devotion. In some images, a crucifix or Bible is depicted nearby, reinforcing his role as a preacher and missionary. The color scheme often used is muted tones with splashes of red to signify martyrdom and sacrifice. Black and white may dominate his attire to represent the Jesuit simplicity, while the background may include shades of blue or gray to convey somberness and solemnity. In Japanese influenced artwork, traditional brushwork and minimalist design can be observed, blending Christian iconography with local artistic styles. In Western art, St. Paul Miki may be portrayed with more dramatic emphasis on his suffering, typical of Baroque influences, using chiaroscuro, chiaroscuro to highlight contrast between light and shadows. In contrast, Japanese Christian art often portrays him with restraint, focusing on spiritual serenity rather than graphic depictions of pain. There are no recorded miracles attributed to St. Paul Miki during his lifetime or posthumously that are officially recognized in the Catholic tradition. His sainthood is primarily based on his martyrdom and unwavering faith rather than miraculous interventions. While many saints are associated with supernatural events, St. Paul Mickey's legacy is centered on his evangelization efforts, his steadfastness in the face of persecution, and his inspiring final sermon before his execution. His influence on the spread of Christianity in Japan and the perseverance of Japanese Christians despite intense persecution is often considered a spiritual triumph rather than a series of specific miracles. Saint Paul Miki was martyred on February 5th, 1597, alongside 25 others in Nagasaki, Japan. Their execution marked the first major persecution of Christians in Japan, and their deaths have quickly became a symbol of faith and resilience within the Christian community. The memory of their sacrifice spread through Jesuit missionary networks and Christian communities across Asia and Europe. Following their martyrdom, local Japanese Christians began venerating Paul Miki and his companions as martyrs. Despite the suppression of Christianity in Japan, secret devotion persisted. Jesuit missionaries who survived the persecution documented the events in letters and reports sent to Europe, which played a crucial role in spreading awareness of the martyrs' faith and inspiring veneration along other communities in the global Catholic world. The formal process toward canonization began with the collection of testimonies and documentation regarding the lives, virtues, and martyrdom of Paul Miki and his other companions. This included eyewitness accounts from missionaries, converts, and even officials involved in their execution. The Congregation of Rites, the body responsible for canonization in Catholic churches, reviewed these documents as a part of the initial inquiry into their sanctity. The first major step with their beatification, which is a recognition of the person's entry into heaven and their ability to intercede for people who prayed in their name. Pope Urban VIII beatified Paul Miki and his fellow martyrs on September 14th, 1627, just 30 years after their passings. This recognition was based on their unwavering faith and their circumstances of their martyrdom, which were considered evidence of their heroic virtue. After beatification, devotion to the 26 martyrs of Japan grew, especially within missionary communities and among Japanese Christians. Their story was included in Catholic liturgical calendars and churches, as well as missions that were named in their honor. This widespread veneration helped to maintain momentum toward their eventual canonization. The cause for canonization, which was formally advanced in the 19th century during the papacy of Pope Pius IX, The church revisited the documentation, reaffirming the historical accuracy of the accounts and their martyrdom, as well as their reputation for holiness. While miracles are typically required for canonization, martyrs like Paul Miki can be canonized based on the testimony of their martyrdom alone, as dying for the faith is considered the ultimate act of witness to Christ. St. Paul Miki and his 25 companions were canonized on June 8, 1862, by Pope Pius IX in a solemn ceremony held at St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City. This event was significant as it recognized not only individual sanctity but also the collective sacrifice of the diverse group of martyrs, includes both Japanese converts and foreign missionaries. Following the canonization, the church established February 6th as the feast day of St. Paul Miki and his companions. This date is observed in the Roman Catholic liturgical calendar and commemorated worldwide, particularly in Japan, where memorials and shrines have been dedicated to their memory. St. Paul Mickey's canonization highlighted the universality of the Catholic Church, acknowledging the faith of Christians in non European contexts. His story continues to inspire missionaries, theologians, and laypeople, serving as a testimony to the power of faith in the face of persecution.